Hello, and welcome to the first in our video series on the Network and Information Security Directive, or as more commonly referred to, NIS2. In this video series, we will be discussing some areas of interest pertaining to NIS2. Now is also a good time to note that on the 30th of August, the government did publish the scheme for the National Cybersecurity Bill, which will eventually form the basis for the Irish transposing legislation. I'm joined here today by my colleague, Laura McFadden, from the Technology and Innovation Group. You're very welcome here today, Laura.
Hi, thanks, Vivian.
So can you start by giving us a bit of an overview of what NIS2 is?
Yeah, so NIS2 replaces the existing NIS directive. So both are EU directives and they aim to achieve a high level of common cybersecurity across the EU, except that NIS2 is more comprehensive and it has a broader scope.
Thanks for that overview. And before we jump into the NIS2 requirements, can you maybe just outline for us why there was a need to replace NIS1 with NIS2 when there's only 6 years gap between the two directives?
So, as I'm sure we all know, there's been rapid technological developments and increased digitization. And with this rapid change comes an increased threat landscape. So NIS2 essentially aims to modernize the legal framework in order to be able to keep up with this change.
Thanks, Laura. I understand that the scope of NIS2 is much broader than that of NIS1. Why should organizations care about this?
Yeah, so because of the broader scope, many entities may not have anticipated that they would fall within the scope of NIS2, and they might very well fall within that scope now. So it's really important to engage with NIS2 early on. For example, NIS2 includes new sectors such as B2B ICT service management, manufacturing and research. And some sectors which were already included under NIS1 have now been expanded under NIS2 as well.
That's interesting. Can you maybe give us an example of such an expanded sector?
Definitely. So a good example is the digital infrastructure sector. So under NIS, this only included IXPs, DNS service providers and TLD name registries. Now under NIS2, this sector has been expanded to include, amongst others, data center service providers, electronic communications networks and electronic communication services. So this would include, for example, instant messaging apps, and that expansion alone would pull in dozens of entities under the scope of NIS2 now.
I see. Thanks, Laura. And tell me, how is it determined whether an entity will be classified as essential versus important?
Factors like sector, organisation size and revenue will be taken into consideration. However, in some instances, entities will be considered essential regardless of those factors.
That's interesting. So it seems that just because an entity might not have previously been captured by the scope of NIS1 does not mean that they should assume that they also won't be captured by the scope of NIS2. So tell me, what does this mean for organizations practically, and how will an organization know that it's actually been designated?
Unfortunately, we won't know until the transposing legislation comes in, but preparation for NIS2 should certainly begin now. So organisations should assess whether or not they fall within the scope of NIS2, because there is a possibility that governments could require entities to self-assess and register, for example, on an online platform.
Thank you, Laura. And just before we close off, can you please remind us what the deadline is for transposition in Ireland?
17th of October 2024.
And that's all we have time for today. Laura, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you all for watching. In our next video, we'll be speaking about risk management and reporting under NIS2.